Well, the 2024 Major League Baseball season for the Orioles is officially over. 91-71. Not only are they going back to the postseason, but they clinched the number one wild card spot and will be hosting the Kansas City Royals in a best-of-3 series this week. I'll tell you, though, how they got there with a sweep over the Twins this weekend, coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Sunday, September 29th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles series sweep in Minnesota over the Twins this weekend to finish off the regular season. The Orioles get to 90-plus wins for back-to-back years, playing really good baseball, won 7 of 10 to finish off the regular season. And with the win they had Friday night, they clinched the top wild card spot, which means they're going to be playing at home this week. And we know it's going to be a rematch of 10 years ago. The Kansas City Royals are coming to Baltimore. But I'm going to recap all 3 games from this weekend, all 3 wins from the Orioles over the Twins, get you what went right, what went wrong, and a shout out to a player or a group of players for each of those games. Then we'll weave in a little bit of playoff stuff to just talk about the context of everything that happened this weekend, because of course those Saturday and Sunday games really didn't matter too much for the O's. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So thank you all for joining us live. If you are here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, if you're here, make sure you are liked, commenting, and subscribing to Locked On Orioles on YouTube. Going to be a whole lot of content coming your way as the Orioles now enter the postseason. The regular season is officially over. The Orioles at 91-71 in this season. And listen, we knew the O's the whole time, or at least most of us knew they were going to make the playoffs, but the way they were playing baseball in August and the first part of September, it wasn't looking like the O's were going to look good going into the postseason. It looked like they were going to limp their way into the playoffs. And then they started to play a little bit better. And then they clinched a playoff spot in New York last week. They won that series. And then they clinched the home field advantage for the wild card on Friday. And they end up sweeping this series to finish the season. And all of a sudden, 7-3 in their final 10 games. They get to 91 wins. And I think I am, and I think a lot of you all are as well, feeling a whole lot better about the Orioles right now heading into the postseason than you were about 2 weeks ago. But I'm going to recap the 3-game series this weekend between the O's and the Twins as the Orioles got the sweep. And we will start with the victory on Friday. Orioles winning it 7-2 on Friday night. And with that win, they went into this Twins series with a magic number of 1 to clinch the top wild card spot. It was 1 either Orioles win or Tigers loss. And the O's didn't want to play around with hoping the Tigers would lose anymore. They got it done themselves with a 7-2 victory. And what went right in that one? Well, Cade Povich certainly shoved it to his old organization on Friday night. Povich, who's been solid, I would say, as a rookie, had some up and down starts throughout the year, gets the ball against his former team for the first time. Remember Povich, who was a third-round pick in 2021 by the Twins out of Nebraska. And at the deadline in 2022, he was dealt to the Orioles, along with Yennier Cano, and then 2 younger pitchers in Juan Nunez and Juan Rojas, both who are still in the O's organization in the minor leagues, for, at the time, Orioles closer Jorge Lopez. And it's a whole nother episode to talk about the ins and outs of that entire trade, but the O's have certainly won that deal with Minnesota. Cano was an all-star reliever last year. He's been great again for the O's this year. And now Cade Povich has stepped up and really helped out this Orioles team. And his first time against his old team, 5 2/3 scoreless innings for Povich on 2 hits, 2 strikeouts, and 1 walk on 79 pitches for the rookie left-hander. And remember, not only did Friday's win clinch the number 1 wildcard spot for the Orioles, it also knocked the Twins out. Now, listen, the Twins were not exactly in a spot where they had a great chance to make the playoffs. Once they got to Friday, they had free fallen they needed to win and either have the Royals or the Tigers get swept. And the Twins had to win all 3 games this weekend just to get in. But that loss officially buried the Twins as well on Friday night. So although the Twins looked lackluster, they were still technically alive and still technically playing for something when Povich went in and pitched that well. And really, this was a good version of Cade Povich. I think the best version of Cade Povich gets a lot more swing and miss than we saw from him on Friday night, just 7 whiffs on 47 swings. That makes you worry a little bit. That's a lot of balls in play from a guy who is a fly ball pitcher and can be liable to give up a home run ball or two. But he just attacked the zone with that invisible fastball. It's not the greatest velocity fastball of all time, although he threw basically all of the hardest pitches of his major league career in that start on Friday, including his average fastball velocity was 93.7 miles an hour. I mean, you go up 1.5. That's pretty unbelievable right there from Cade Povich to be able to go out there and maybe it was, some adrenaline potentially from him. You would think that, you're playing the team that traded you away. You get a little chip on the shoulder from that. But I mean, he was absolutely firing the ball in there. He touched 96 with a fastball, which was pretty impressive on Friday night. And that's that invisible fastball that has the kind of ride to it, the almost invisible rise where the ball in reality doesn't go down as much as other fastballs. So it's harder to square up. You pop it up a lot. And that's what happened with Povich. It wasn't a lot of swing and miss, but it was a whole lot of lazy fly balls, of pop-ups that he induced. And sometimes those can be as good as strikeouts because especially when you're getting infield pop-ups, you are getting outs without runners advancing. And that was just good stuff from Cade Povich. Now, the other offerings, they weren't super impressive. He got 1 combined whiff from the curveball, the changeup, and the sweeper. He threw them for strikes a little bit more than he usually does. Only 1 walk in 5 2/3 was pretty impressive because this is a guy who has struggled with his command. And at times, he was able to throw all 4 of his pitches for a strike, which is certainly a good thing for Cade Povich. But you're going to take that. You're going to take everything you got there from Povich in a game where you're still looking to clinch something. Now, I don't think this makes him the game 3 starter in the postseason. I still believe that is Dean Kramer's job. And I don't know if Povich would even start any postseason games. And I also don't know if he'll even be on the wild card roster. That's something we'll talk about tomorrow. But one thing I will say is he's earned himself a look to be on the postseason roster. And maybe you wait until the ALDS when you need a little more pitching in a best of 5 series. But Povich, at least out of the bullpen, as a long man, as a mop-up guy, could help you in a playoff series. And he's pitching well enough right now to maybe earn that role. Now, what went wrong for the Orioles on Friday? That was that Seranthony Dominguez had a little bit of a blip in the 9th inning. After Cade Povich came out of that game on Friday, the Orioles continued to keep the Twins scoreless. Jacob Webb with a nice look in 1 1/3 scoreless with 2 Ks. Danny Coulombe did walk a batter, but still got 3 outs without allowing a run. And the O's went to Seranthony Dominguez, leading 7-0 in the bottom of the 9th. Dominguez had been struggling a little bit lately, and he hadn't pitched in a few days. I believe he was the most well-rested Orioles reliever heading into Friday's game. I don't think he had pitched since he closed out the playoff clincher Tuesday night in New York. So Brandon Hyde probably wanted to get him some work anyway. And it was not his best of outings. He went walk, double, RBI single, or 2-run single, I should say. And all of a sudden, it was 7-2. Now, he did lock in after that, get 3 consecutive ground ball outs, and end the game with a 7-2 victory. But he didn't get any swings and misses. And that's the Seranthony Dominguez thing. Like, yeah, he might walk some guys, and yeah, he might give up a home run, but he is going to usually miss bats with that fastball and devastating slider combination. And the command was shaky once again, and he did not miss any bats. And including that outing on Friday. This is not including when he went 2/3 of an inning scoreless on Sunday, but the last 5 outings stopping at Friday night, 3 2/3, 6 hits, 5 runs, 1 strikeout, and 4 walks for Dominguez. That is not good. Now, a plus side is he did get 2 strikeouts for both outs that he got on Sunday. So that is definitely moving him in the right direction. But the previous 5 outings for Dominguez before that stretch, 9 strikeouts to no walks. That's why he was pitching so well. He wasn't walking anyone. So I'm not sure how I'm feeling about Dominguez right now. He is certainly still going into the postseason as one of Brandon Hyde's high leverage relievers. There's no doubt about that. He's got such great stuff. And overall, He's been really good for Baltimore since coming over at the deadline from the Phillies. But I think we can all agree at this point, Dominguez at one point was the Orioles' set closer after he took over that role for Craig Kimbrell. I don't think that's the case anymore. He could certainly get the ninth inning. It could be something like we saw Tuesday in New York, where he got the final two outs of the ninth. But I really think even the ninth inning, Brandon Hyde is going to play the matchups, because if there's one weakness on this O's team going into the postseason, it's the bullpen. And the biggest weakness that pen might be, they do not have the shutdown ninth inning guy that a lot of these other teams have. And a lot of that is because A, Felix Bautista is missing the whole year, and B, Craig Kimbrell was not good in the second half and got DFA'd, but they haven't quite found the right guy to go to. You can still win by playing matchups in the ninth inning as well. I'm not super sure that the Rangers even had a go-to ninth inning guy in the postseason last year, and they won the World Series, but something to watch there with Seranthony Dominguez, who was great with the Phillies in the postseason the last couple of years. Hopefully he can do that again with the O's this year. Now, the shout out for Friday's game, the shout out goes to Ryan Mountcastle, who was 3 for 5 with a double and 2 singles in this game. Through that one, that made him 6 for 13 with a 55% hard hit rate since returning from the injured list. He also added a 1 for 4 with an RBI on Saturday and a 1 for 4 on Sunday. Those 3 hits Friday, his first 3-hit game since August 10th. And his first 3-hit game, it included at least 1 extra base hit since July 29th. Now, he missed about a month in there, so that's some of it. But we also know Mountcastle was really struggling in the second half when he went on the IL in late August with that wrist injury. He seems to be swinging it a whole lot better. He is definitely the better defensive option at first base over Ryan O'Hearn, so he gives you that bump as well if he is on the field. And really, if Mountcastle can give you any production out of, probably the 5, 6, or 7 spot, which is where he'll usually be hitting for the O's in the postseason, if you can get that production back as well, it just makes the O's even healthier and even better going into the postseason. And with that 7-2 win Friday, they knew not only were they going to the postseason, but they would be hosting that best-of-3 wildcard series at Oriole Park. So after that, things got interesting because the O's kind of didn't have anything else to play for with 2 games remaining in the season on Saturday and Sunday. So you really wouldn't have been too upset had they lost those games because you're not exactly truly trying to win them, but they won the games anyway. And on Saturday, they did it in even bigger blowout fashion with a 9-2 victory. I'll tell you how they did it with that Saturday win coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place that first $5 bet. And maybe you're feeling real confident about the Ravens tonight against the Bills, and you want to lay a little money there at FanDuel. But you could do it all again at FanDuel.com. So the O's get the win on Friday night to clinch that top wild card spot. And then they move to Saturday, where they really didn't have anything else to play for, and neither did the Twins, because remember, the Twins were eliminated from postseason contention by losing to the Orioles on Friday. So it was kind of a weird scene. Fox had picked up the game on Saturday because they thought, hey, Orioles and Twins both in the wild card race, this will mean something for somebody on Saturday. And kind of weirdly for them, it did not. But the Orioles still won the game 9-2 to clinch the series against Minnesota. And what went right on Saturday? Well, that was that the Orioles were absolutely raking. 9 runs on 16 hits for the O's in Saturday's game to go along with 4 walks as well. That's 16 plus hits for the second time in a week. Orioles had 17 against the Yankees on Wednesday, 16 against the Twins on Saturday. And there were a lot of different guys who pitched in to this win, but the O's just jumped out there early. Ryan O'Hearn with a 2-run homer the opposite way on a ball he didn't even think was going out, and a ball that wasn't even hard hit, wasn't even over 95 miles an hour, but still snuck out there down the left field line for a 2-run shot. Gave O'Hearn a home run in back-to-back games, which was cool for him, and also a career-high 15 home runs on the season for Ryan O'Hearn. And O'Hearn was really, really struggling down the stretch for the O's Don't look now. In his final 11 games, Ryan O'Hearn went 13 for 33 at the plate. That is a 390 average for O'Hearn in his final 11 games. That bodes really well for this O's offense moving into October. How about Jackson Holliday on Saturday? Gets the start at shortstop. That was something we knew Brandon Hyde would do as well. Hey, get some different guys in at some slightly different positions just in case we would need them there in the postseason. I think if anything were to happen to Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Holliday is probably your shortstop in the playoffs. So he gets his first start at short. And all he does while hitting leadoff is reach base 5 times in this game. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. 3 for 4 with 2 singles, a double, and 2 walks to go along with 3 hard hit balls in this one. His second career 3-hit game. He had 4 hits against the Red Sox back on August 16th. That was also the only other time in his career he has reached base 5 times in a game. And he may not play a lot in the postseason because it seems like Arias, Westberg, Henderson is going to be that everyday infield in the playoffs. But he's going to be on that playoff roster and be there just in case you need him. I mean, he was on base 7 of 8 times in this Twins series. That's got to feel great for Jackson Holliday, who did not finish the season oh so strongly, even when he was getting, with Westberg and Arias and Mateo out, basically everyday chances for the O's at second base. Now, speaking of second base, it was Ramon Arias who started there in this game Saturday, and he got 2 hits for the first time since coming off the injured list, which was really good to see for Ramon. Did not have a hit Sunday. He went 0 for 2. That snapped his streak, but with the 2 hits Saturday, it made it hits in all 6 games since Arias had come off the injured list with that ankle issue. And as I just said, I think Arias is going to be an everyday starter in the postseason for the O's. And finally, Adley Rutschman. 2 hits in the game, which was great to see. But even better than that, with the 2 hits, a single and a double and 2 RBIs, he had 4 hard hit balls of the 6 balls that he put in play. That was the first time Adley Rutschman had hit 4 separate balls in play over 95 miles an hour in terms of their exit velocity since June 9th against the Rays. That was the game where he had that game-clinching grand slam to blow it open in the 8th inning at the Trop. June 9th. That is 3.5 months ago, the last time that Adley did what he did Saturday. Those hard hit balls are good predictors of future success. Maybe that predicts future success for Rutschman in the postseason. Now, what went wrong on Saturday night? Well, not much for the O's, but it was the Twins' ability to get Emmanuel Rivera out. Because you might have been wondering, Connor, how are you going to talk about this offense and not talk about what Emmanuel Rivera did? Well, we're going to talk about it right now. Rivera, with pretty much the best offensive game of his major league career in this one, goes 4 for 4 with a double, 2 homers, a walk, and 4 RBIs to go along with 4 hard hit balls in this one. Just took 2 center cut pitches early in that game and smacked them both out to left center field for long balls. Just the second 2-homer game of Rivera's career. He also did it at Coors Field when he was a member of the Arizona Diamondbacks back on August 13th of 2022. It was his first career 4-hit game, his first career game where he was on base 5 times. And those 2 home runs that Rivera hit in this one on Saturday were both just absolutely crushed off the bat. The first one in the second inning, 108.7 off the bat, 442 feet. The second one in the fifth, 107.9 off the bat, 405 feet. Those were the second and third hardest hit balls of the season for Emmanuel Rivera. He's been a little bit of a savior for the O's offense. He has swung the bat really, really well since he came over off waivers from the Marlins in late August with Westberg and Mateo and Arias out. He kind of saved the O's. Who knows what his role will be? Heck, he's firmly on the bubble of even making the postseason roster just because the O's have gotten so healthy and they're pretty stacked again in the infield. But he's done enough where if the O's do want to keep him, maybe carry a 14th hitter, an extra guy, Emmanuel Rivera, who plays good defense too at third and first, could be that option. And the shout out for Saturday, well, the shout out goes to Tucker Davidson. How about that? I talked about it on Friday's episode, how if the Orioles clinched the number 1 wild card on Friday, which they did, and it meant they had nothing to play for on Saturday and Sunday, they would probably call up some bulk pitchers and not pitch Dean Kramer. Kramer, who was initially slated to start Sunday's game in Minnesota. Well, it looks like he's going to be the Orioles' Game 3 starter if they get there in the wild card series on Thursday. So you don't want to give him a regular start Saturday or Sunday. You want to make sure he is all good and rested for Thursday. But because of that, you also don't want to just do a bullpen game twice in a row and run your A bullpen super tired Because remember, you only get one off day on Monday and then immediately into that wild card series on Tuesday. So Tucker Davidson, he comes up. Brian Baker optioned to AAA to make room for Davidson. And it is unfortunate for Brian Baker because he was optioned. That makes him ineligible to make both the wild card series and the ALDS roster. So maybe Baker could be back if they need him, if the O's make a long postseason run. But we do know that Baker will not be on the initial playoff roster. But they go to Tucker Davidson. And I know some people are like, oh, why are you not going to Brandon Young? Why are you not going to Chase McDermott or even a guy like Trevor Rogers? Well, in this spot, when you have nothing to play for and you're just trying to eat innings, you want to go to a veteran who isn't exactly part of your future. And we'll see. The Orioles could bring Tucker Davidson back on another minor league deal next year. It's certainly possible. But you want to go to a veteran who, hey, if it goes wrong, you need a guy who you're okay with just kind of wearing it. And what does that mean? Well, say Tucker Davidson came in and gave up 4 runs in the first 2 innings. The O's would be like, doesn't matter. You got to go back out there. You got to eat innings for us so we don't have to use and tire out our true relievers. Now, if it's Brandon Young and he gives up 4 runs in the first 2 innings, you're not going to want to shell his confidence and send him back out there in his major league debut. You're going to want to pull him, and that puts your bullpen in a bad spot. Tucker Davidson's been around in the bigs in AAA for a while. He's been there, done that, not really a part of the Orioles' future. You're kind of more okay sending Davidson out there to get shelled if that has to happen. But for Davidson, that is not what happened. Now, he had been really good in AAA this year. The Orioles brought him in off waivers from the Royals in the offseason. I was really intrigued with his splitter, and it was really, really devastating, but he only threw it 11% of the time in AAA this year. Now, I thought he'd be a good reliever from the left side. The Orioles actually, smartly enough, converted him back to a starter, which is what he was when he first came up with the Braves. Remember, he started a World Series game in 2021 with Atlanta after Charlie Morton took that line drive off his shin and had to be scratched. They went to Tucker Davidson, so he's been there, done that. But in AAA Norfolk this year, 116 innings, a 3.89 ERA. Now, he had a 2.85 ERA through July, and then a 5.85 ERA since August 1st, so really wasn't pitching his best down the stretch. But Davidson gave the Orioles all they could have wanted and more. They used Matt Bowman as an opener. He went an inning and a third scoreless with 2 Ks. Nice to see him with a bounce-back outing. And then Tucker Davidson, 4 2/3 scoreless, 4 hits, 1 strikeout, 2 walks on 67 pitches, just 3 hard hit balls. And listen, some of that was because the Twins were clearly about done with this season. They had been eliminated. They were just trying to get this game over with. So they were swinging early. They weren't making good contact. That was certainly a part of it. But if you're Davidson, you're a guy who's been at AAA all year. You still got to get a bunch of big league hitters out. And he got 14 big league hitters out, which was huge for the Orioles pitching plan this weekend. You cannot thank Tucker Davidson enough for what he was able to do on Saturday to allow the Orioles' real relievers, who will be with this team on the playoff roster, to be rested and ready to go for Saturday. It was tremendous for Davidson. It was a 6-pitch kitchen sink. He just said, here's everything I've got. Try and hit it, which was kind of fun to watch. Slider, splitter, sinker, four-seamer, curveball, sweeper. He threw them all out there. He didn't get a lot of swing and miss, but he got outs. And when you're just trying to eat innings in this spot, outs are exactly what you are looking for. He threw strikes, and the Twins were collapsing on top of themselves, which certainly helped. Wouldn't mind bringing him back to compete for a bullpen spot in 2025. Just big time shout out to Tucker Davidson for that one. And the O's got Cano and Perez and Aiken, the work that they wanted just to keep them fresh, and they win the game 9-2 on Saturday. And then once again, they go into Sunday. And I thought they'd do it again. I thought maybe Bruce Zimmerman would be here. I thought maybe Adrian Hauser would be here, and they just throw him to the Wolves again. Instead, Albert Suarez kind of pitched in bulk, which was a little intriguing to me. The Orioles won the game, but I wanted to break down that decision to let Albert Suarez go 6 innings on Sunday and what it means for his playoff roster future. That is coming up next to finish off the pod. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Gametime. Now, no better time to be talking about Gametime here on the Locked On Orioles podcast, because it's the best place to get Orioles tickets. That includes Orioles playoff tickets. And they also have a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And I know many of you might be going to ticket app after ticket app right now to see, okay, which Orioles games can I go to this week? Now, unfortunately, as I'm recording right now, we don't have game times yet for these wild card games. I would love for those game times to come out sooner rather than later. But either way, we're going to get them at some point. And maybe when those come out, maybe you say, you know what? I can miss that amount of work. I'm going to the game. Go to Gametime to get those tickets. They've got all-in pricing. You turn this on, you don't have any surprise fees. The Gametime picks, the curation makes it easier to save more on these O's tickets. You get a seat view, you get a lowest price guarantee. They've got it all. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB. That is LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. So the O's went into Sunday once again, really with nothing to play for. They were intrigued because it was still up in the air who they would play in the wild card series, either the Tigers or the Royals, but not much for the O's to do with their own standing. And I figured they would make a roster move for the game, and they did. And we'll get to all of that. But either way, the Orioles won it on Sunday 6-2 to complete the sweep and finish the season at 91-71. Just the sixth time in franchise history, a team that started playing in 1954, that the Orioles have had 90 or more wins in back-to-back seasons. That is pretty impressive stuff. So what went right for the Orioles win on Sunday? Well, that was Albert Suarez. He's had a little bit of a rough stretch here down the stretch for the O's, but he was really good in this one. 6 innings of 2-run ball. He allows just 4 hits with 4 Ks, 1 walk, and 2 homers on 71 pitches. He did give up some hard hit balls, but Suarez finishes with a 3.70 ERA for the Orioles this season. I mean, what just a savior he has been. We will break down his season much, much further once we get deeper into the offseason. But man, just you got to tip your hat to Albert Suarez and what he had done for the Orioles this year. Gave up 2 early solo homers. Those were really the only blemishes on the mark of Suarez. He threw a bunch of strikes, and hey, he took advantage of a Twins team that was sad and honestly wanted to go home. They swung early and often. They were trying to get quick outs. Suarez was trying to make quick outs, and it combined for a perfect harmony of a bunch of quick outs, which you love in a game where you're not playing for much. You're trying to get off the field and avoid injury. Now, the issues lately for Suarez have come when he's kind of only had the fastball, and between the cutter, the curveball, and the changeup, he hasn't had a feel for any of them. It felt like he had a feel for the curveball and the changeup as well on Sunday, and that kind of allowed him to pitch better than he had recently. And going 6 innings allowed the O's to not have to tax the bullpen. They got the guys the work that they wanted and put them in a good spot moving into the off day Monday and the beginning of the wild card series on Tuesday. Now, what went wrong on Sunday? Well, that was Albert Suarez's wild card roster spot, because what the Orioles did on Saturday, which was Suarez was supposed to be the starter. They said he's not going to pitch at all. We're going to go Bowman. Then we're going to call up Davidson to be the bulk guy and then get relievers work. I thought that's the exact same thing they would do. They DFA'd Tucker Davidson before the game, and I thought, okay, they'll call up another bulk guy. Bruce Zimmerman, Adrian Hauser were the 2 kind of veteran-type guys in AAA that could hopefully do exactly what Tucker Davidson did on Saturday. But instead, they called up Colin Selby, which I was fine with. Selby had those amazing 2 outings in New York against the Mets earlier this year and then went back down to AAA. I still think he's an option for the playoff bullpen. So I thought, okay, Selby can give you a little length. He's well rested. Maybe Selby can give you 2 innings. There's multiple relievers the Orioles want to get work. And at the end of the day, you get, a few innings from Suarez, you keep him rested, and you piece it together to get through 9 innings. But that is not what happened. And maybe because Suarez was so efficient, it was only 71 pitches to throw 6 innings. Maybe that's why he was allowed to pitch so deep into the game. But I really thought Suarez would throw 2, maybe 3 innings at most, so he would be ready to pitch even in relief in the wild card series. But that's just not what happened. Now, 71 pitches is not 100 pitches, which is good. But what that means is, on one day of rest, Monday, he's not going to be available to pitch at all on Tuesday. And quite frankly, he's probably not available to pitch in a game 2 on Wednesday either. So with throwing 71 pitches on Sunday, that truly means that Albert Suarez would not be available to pitch at all until a potential game 3 on Thursday of this wild card series. And when you think about it like that, Suarez just might not be on this playoff roster, because you think, okay, He's probably good to pitch in relief Thursday, but he's certainly not, it's not enough rest to start on Thursday. It's enough rest to pitch in relief. Looks like Dean Kramer is going to be that game 3 starter if it gets there for a winner take all game. So is it worth rostering a player? Remember, once you set your wild card roster, unless there's an injury where a player goes on the IL, you can't change it. So you go with the same players throughout the round. Then when you get to the next round, you can make essentially a new roster. So is it worth it to roster Albert Suarez if you know he can't pitch Tuesday or Wednesday? The only game he could pitch is in relief on Thursday, and that's a game that might not even happen. Like, you might not even get there. So in that line of thinking, now that Suarez has thrown 71 pitches on Sunday, it would kind of be a waste of a roster spot, I think, to put him on the wild card roster. So because of that, I don't think he'll be on there. So if the O's do win the wild card series, but it takes them 3 games and Dean Kramer starts game 3 on Thursday, this does line up Suarez to potentially start game 1 on Saturday of the ALDS at Yankee Stadium. He's still, I think, the number 4 starter in this O's rotation. I would put him out there over Cade Povich in that spot. And maybe that was the plan. Maybe the Orioles just saw this and said, hey, we want you to be fully ready to start in a game 1 of the ALDS. Now, I get the argument, hey, you got to get to the ALDS before you can think about that. That's totally right. But that seems to be what was going on here. Now, Suarez has pitched in relief this year, 11 2/3 innings, 4 runs on 7 hits, 7 Ks, 4 walks, and a homer. Definitely, I would say overall, better as a starter than he was as a reliever. Looked shaky at times out of the bullpen. The stuff just didn't kind of play the same out of the pen. And I got to say, I don't like the move to let Suarez throw 71 pitches. I was fine with him starting. Hey, let him throw 30, 40, whatever, get some work in. But whether he's a reliever or a starter, he is still, I think pretty obviously, one of the Orioles' 12 or 13 best pitchers on their roster. And it needs to be an all hands on deck, even for a series that could be only 2 games. You still need all hands on deck. And I think Albert Suarez being available to pitch includes being all hands on deck. And you kind of, almost for no reason in a game that was meaningless, took him out of that spot. So again, there is a flip side to this where you could say, okay, Suarez gave us 6 innings. That means we didn't have to rely on someone else who, you could have called up Bruce Zimmerman. He could have been so bad over 3 innings that you had to take him out because he gave up like 8 runs. And also it allowed the bullpen to rest. There were clearly 2 guys that, or I guess 3 guys that Brandon Hyde wanted to get some work. It was Jacob Webb, it was Gregory Soto, and it was Sir Anthony Dominguez. And then he called up Colin Selby to cover the other innings, which ended up just being the 9th. And they were able to still stick to that plan. But I don't know, he could be your best long relief option. If anyone start in the wild card series goes south, you're not going to have that. Like, say it's game 3 and, Burns and Eflin pitched pretty well in games 1 and 2, but they did have to use the bullpen. And then Dean Kramer gets in trouble in the 3rd inning of game 3 and you got to go to the bullpen. At some point, you're going to need some kind of long reliever. I know Povich has been good at times, but would you rather have Albert Suarez or Cade Povich in that spot? I would rather have Albert Suarez. And maybe they still roster him and he would still be available for that exact spot on a Thursday, but this makes it more likely that they don't even put him on the roster. So I'll evade total judgment until we see that wild card roster, but I was a little confused by that decision. Now, the thing that may have been going through the Orioles' heads, not just, hey, we want him ready to pitch game 1 of the ALDS, but the home run problem that Suarez has had lately could have been the factor in this for the Orioles brass. Because I talked about this after Suarez's last start. And remember, his 2 runs were both solo home runs that he allowed on Sunday. Through his first 25 appearances with the Orioles this year, he had a 5.3% home run to fly ball rate. That was through August 18th. Among pitchers in the majors with at least 80 innings thrown through that date, that was the lowest home run to fly ball rate in Major League Baseball. 6 homers allowed in 96 1/3 innings. That's kind of absurd. And a little bit of that is good luck as well. Now, on the flip side, over his final 7 starts of the year, he's allowed 11 home runs in 37 1/3 innings, almost double the homers in almost a third of the innings. And that is one of the highest home run to fly ball rates in that stretch since August 19th in baseball. So he's done a complete 180 with the home run ball. And this is the only thing I think the Orioles might have been thinking. You could argue this is kind of overthinking it, but this is what might be in their heads here. In the playoffs, we've talked about how important the home run ball is, right? Over the last 3 postseasons, the team that out-homers its opponent is 62-10. You need to hit home runs in the postseason, and home runs win ball games in the playoffs. They also kill you as the pitching team in the playoffs, especially if you're pitching out of the bullpen. And Suarez was not going to be a starter in the wildcard series. He was going to be a reliever. If you come in and give up homers in short stints, you are in big, big trouble. You don't want to be a home run prone guy as a reliever in the postseason. So maybe the Orioles were seeing how home run prone Suarez has been lately and thinking, ooh, if we're going to use him in relief, which again is going to be his role, Kramer is going to pitch game 3, they might think that is a really, really tough spot, especially in a 3-game series where every pitch could decide an entire series. Maybe they were thinking, let's just stay away from that. Let's give him a start if we get to that ALDS. It certainly could be the thinking. I'm not in total agreement, but we will certainly see how it all plays out. And the shout out for Sunday's win, well, the shout out goes to the Orioles bullpen because it was just some guys needing to get some work, but they look good doing that work. Seranthony Dominguez came in the 7th after Suarez. He did allow a couple of base runners with a walk and a single, but he got 2 strikeouts and his slider looked really good. He had much better slider command, which was fantastic to see. Gregory Soto only faced 1 batter, but he was as nasty as he's been the last couple of weeks. Gregory Soto might be my most trusted nasty reliever heading into the postseason. Who would have said that a month ago? But that's kind of where we are with Gregory Soto. And then Jacob Webb, you could tell he wanted to get just a little better feel out of his pitches, so he gets one more pre-playoff outing and looks good in a scoreless inning. And then Colin Selby, who I mentioned was really nasty when we saw him last time. He was added to the roster again on Sunday. He puts up a 0 in the 9th, throws the final regular season pitch of the year. Colin Selby. How about that? But hey, not only that, I wouldn't be super surprised, especially with Baker not on it and now Suarez not on the postseason roster, if Colin Selby maybe claims that final bullpen spot for the Orioles wild card roster. But they locked down the 6-2 win, and they locked down a series sweep over the Twins to finish 91-71. The Orioles will host the wild card series at home against the Kansas City Royals. And that is because the Tigers, somehow, some way, don't really understand it, lost 2 of 3 to the Chicago White Sox this weekend. Don't know how it happened, but it did. On the flip side, Kansas City won the finale in Atlanta, and now the Royals finished tied with the Tigers. They have the tiebreaker, so they are in the number 5 seed, and they will come to Baltimore for a best-of-3 series. We've got the off day on Monday now coming up. Well, almost everybody has the off day on Monday. How about what's going on in the NL wildcard? I mean, that is just an absolute disaster. Mets and Braves having to play a doubleheader Monday to decide if they can get into the postseason, and then they would have to immediately turn around and play again in the playoffs Tuesday. It gives, whether one of them or both of them gets into the wild card, gives them a severe disadvantage. So you know who's really happy on that other side? That would be the Brewers and the Padres, who would be hosting those teams in the wild card series. But that's a conversation for another day, and probably a conversation for Locked On Mets, Locked On Braves, and Locked On Diamondbacks. You can go check out those podcasts if they get postseason ready as well as over at Locked On Royals, because that is the Orioles' postseason opponent in the wild card round. Can we get through those demons from 2014? Hopefully that is the case. Well, either way, I will have a full preview of the wild card series between the O's and the Royals coming up on Monday night. We're going to go live again right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It's going to be a 7 p.m. Eastern time live show on Monday night. Going to give you a full preview of the O's and the Royals. I'll tell you about all the pitching matchups against the O's hitters and all the matchups between O's pitching and Royals hitters, the states of both teams, injuries, all that good stuff across the board, who's hot, who's not, and then give you my final prediction on what a playoff roster could look like for the wild card round for the Orioles. So that is coming up on a Monday episode. We'll be live back on YouTube at 7 p.m. on Monday. Until then, I am Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us live here for this one. I hope you join us again tomorrow night. That's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.